Those of you that don't know me and are watching via Teams and the internet, my name's Mike Lawrence. I'm the chairman. The team supporting me either side will now present themselves and introduce themselves. Thank you.
I'm Councillor Bob Cope and I'm Vice Chairman of the Planning.
Thank you. I'm Annette Roberts. I'm Corporate Director, Infrastructure and Business Growth. Thank you.
My name is Pardeep Sharma and I'm the Planning Solicitor advising the committee tonight. Thank you.
I'm Kelly Harris. I'm the Lead Planning Manager for the Council.
I'm Lucy Duffy. I'm the Assistant Team Manager for the South of the District. And this is Laura Moon, Senior Case Officer, also in the South team. Thank you.
Very much. We'll go to the first agenda item, which is the minutes of the last meeting. And can I say thank you to Vice Chairman for I know we've got apologies from Councillor Perry, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Boyle, Councillor Phil Davis. The rest of you are obviously all. Yes, can we have the minutes approved? Thank you very much. I've done apologies. Declarations of interest. Have we got any declarations to declare? No. We now move on to the planning applications. And the first application we're going to look at tonight is 21/01/0277T. It's Micklewood Stud. Lucy, can you just summarise the application for us, please?
The application site measures 175 square metres and consists of a square piece of agricultural land next to, adjacent to Micklewood Lane within the within the parish of Penkridge. Planning permission has previously been granted for a temporary workers' dwelling in relation to the equestrian and agricultural uses on site. The applicant now seeks outline permission for permanent workers' dwelling to replace the existing temporary dwelling. The principle of a new dwelling in the Greenbelt is contrary to national and local policy and is therefore harmful by definition. However, a case for very special circumstances has been put forward to demonstrate that there is a functional need to live on site to support the existing stud farm and small-scale sheep and cattle enterprise. The Council has commissioned an independent agricultural assessment which concludes that sufficient justification has been provided to suggest that there is a genuine need for a workers' dwelling on site which cannot be met by another dwelling. The development would support a business that contributes to the local economy, which should also be afforded significant weight. The development would not be detrimental to the visual amenity of the landscape. In addition, there are no concerns arising in respect to the natural environment, residential amenity or highway safety. Approval is therefore recommended, subject to the removal of the existing temporary dwelling on site. There's a couple of updates on the update list. There was a typo in paragraph 1.1.1. The site measures 900 square metres, and in 5422, we therefore conclude that this dwelling complies with the criteria, taking out temporary. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lucy. There are no local members present. Has any member got any questions? Robert Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very keen to support this application as it actually helps, I think, those that are still engaged in agriculture and seeking to gain a dwelling which is necessary, especially if they are dealing with breeding horses, and especially if they've got a stallion. And it's important that they're on site at the right time to be able to carry out the necessary serving of mares. And the mere fact that they've got sheep there as well, you've got to bear in mind they need to be someone on site, because we're in an age where rustling has seemed to have risen its ugly head again. And it's often the case where stock that's been left somewhere in fields away from main buildings have been rustled and lost. So the importance of having somebody on site, to me, is actually supporting those that are still helping us with our agricultural occupations. So I'm very pleased that the actual recommendation is for approval. I would just like to ask, though, one of the officers about the restrictions. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting mixed up again. Ask your question, Robert.
We didn't have this trouble, you know, the last planning meeting, did we? No, the question I would like to ask is about the workers entitled to live there, and it's a case of who can justify that position. Is it somebody that comes weekends, or is it somebody that permanently helps out? Because I think that's an important part of this application.
I think Kelly's going to answer that. Well, oh, okay.
Yes, it's a very reasonable question, because clearly when we do have a situation where the development has actually got to be linked to the people who actually live there, we then impose a planning condition. You will note that we've got planning condition 5, whereby the special circumstances have been demonstrated, but they've only been demonstrated for the purposes, of people who are actually going to solely or mainly be working in connection with Micklewood Stud. So the condition makes that very clear, and then it does go on to say, or their spouse and any resident dependents. And the council, this is a condition that we commonly impose and inspectors impose. So you've got the flexibility of ensuring there's the functional link with the development. You need the spouse to live there, and then you need the dependents to actually live there. Now, I think your question is, well, where actually is the evidence? It's like all other planning conditions, it's self-monitoring. If we were to actually receive any information that the condition has actually been breached, we would then, submit a written request, for confirmation and information, and then follow it up to ensure that the provisions, of 5 are met, because it's very important that the provisions of 5 are met, because it's only been granted in the green belt, for the purposes of Micklewood Stud. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's most useful for the applicant to know that.
Councillor Bates.
Mr. Chairman, as a Penkridge councillor, I'd like to draw members' attention to 6.1. And that reads, this proposal is inappropriate development in the green belt. They're harmful by definition. However, a case for very special circumstances has been put forward, which is considered to demonstrate a genuine need for a permanent dwelling on the site to serve the existing equestrian and agricultural enterprise. The proposal would support the growth of a rural business that contributes to the local rural economy and would not be detrimental to the openness of the green belt or the visual amenity of the landscape. In addition, there are no concerns arising in respect of the natural environment, residential amenity or highway safety. On the basis of this, I would recommend that the item be approved. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, Christian.
Thank you, Chairman. There's one or two things that I'm not, again, it seems a good idea, but there's clarification. I don't think much of the plan, because until we got the correction of 900 square metres, there was not the slightest bit of indication how big that square plot is. that's marked on the one drawing. Also, there's no, at the start, the planning history of planning applications in the past. 2018, the siting of a park home for an equestrian worker for a 3-year temporary period. Well, that expired in 2021. We're now in 22. What's going to happen while they build whatever? If they're given permission, where are they going to live? Because that park home hasn't got permission, and there's no mention of it anywhere else. As far as I may have missed it, but someone can clarify that. And also, I ought to know the answer, being on the planning committee. What are we actually giving outline permission for? Is it a 10-bedroom house or a 1-bedroom bungalow? Because I can't see any indication.
The detail of the actual dwelling will come forward with the reserve matters application, and we would be looking to support a sizable dwelling that is appropriate to the plot. So it would be a 2-bed small dwelling, and the caravan and where they want to live is ultimately down to them, but they've told us they need to be on site, and if they need to retain the mobile home, then they'll have to reapply.
I know we shouldn't mention previous developments. I know that the outline for a development in Essington was a certain number of dwellings. When it came to reserve matters, that had increased tremendously. So that's my concern. That, like I say, is there no way we should put some sort of indication of, because once they've got outline permission,
Chris, can I just interrupt you there? We deal with every planning application on its own merits, right? The planning application before us, we're now going to adjudicate on. What happened several years ago in Essington is an entirely different matter. Thank you.
Chair, I was just going to say that this is an outline application. All matters are reserved. So when that reserved matters application comes in, you will then have an opportunity to debate and consider whether it's acceptable in planning terms. And so your opportunity to further comment on the size, layout and design, is not lost. It's just reserved for a future date. Yeah.
Councillor Cox.
It's been a long time since we had an application where we were going to limit the person living there. We used to have a lot of these, and didn't we do them under 106 or something like that? And if necessary, and be under that control then.
The imposition of an occupancy condition is one that you can deal with by way of planning conditions. It's enforceable, it's precise, it's actually imposed by planning inspectors, and it is very common to deal with occupancy conditions by way of a planning condition. So historically, you may have actually done them by 106, but it's not necessary because a condition of this type meets all the planning tests of a planning condition. It's robust, sound and clear. Yeah.
Any other?
Just want to fully support what Robert has had to say. I have delivered calves and sheep, and I do understand the need for a worker on site. It is a viable business even in these difficult times, and it's also selling locally as well. And I think we should fully support those people who are anxious to expand and improve their own businesses. Thank you.
Okay, members, we've gone from questions through to debate. Does anybody else wish to say anything? No? Okay, well, the recommendation is to approve this application with conditions, and those conditions are on page 17. I won't go through them. All those in favour, please indicate.
Chairman, that is unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you, members. We'll now move on to the second planning application before us tonight, 22/00082 COU, and that's land to the rear of Horn Lodge. Lucy, can you summarise, please?
The application site is located 0.2 kilometres west of the A449, just north of its junction with the M54 motorway, within the hamlet of Coven Heath and within the West Midlands Greenbelt. The wider application site is allocated within the adopted site allocations document for one gypsy and traveller pitch adjoining the Horton Lodge Mobile Home Park. The proposed development would be accessed directly off Ball Lane via the existing access drive through the Mobile Home Park. There is an existing amenity block, and the site is screened on all sides by 1.8 metre high fencing and conifer hedges. The application proposes 4 permanent gypsy and traveller pitches comprising a maximum number of 6 caravans in total across 4 pitches. This would comprise a twin-unit mobile home and a touring caravan space on each of the 2 larger pitches with the existing planning permission, and 2 single units on the 2 additional smaller pitches. This site has physical capacity to accommodate the 2 additional mobile homes proposed without encroaching beyond the defined boundaries of the 2018 site allocation, although would still be considered to be an appropriate development. As per the NPPF, very special circumstances are needed to clearly justify the proposal. The recognised gypsy and traveller status of the applicants, their personal needs for a settled base for health and education, the best interests of children, acknowledged shortfall in the current 5-year supply and pitch provision, and lack of suitable alternative sites are all factors that weigh significantly in favour of the proposal. Furthermore, as considered above, the proposal has limited harm to the openness of the Greenbelt. As such, in regard of the planning balance, it is therefore considered that there are very special circumstances that clearly outweigh the harm caused to the Greenbelt by way of inappropriateness. The proposed density and layout and existing screening would not compromise neighbouring amenity. The site has safe and convenient access, and there is suitable provision of parking. Subject to the imposition of conditions as recommended by the County Highway Officer, there are no sustainable highway objections. Overall, the scheme is considered acceptable and recommended for approval, subject to a number of conditions.
Thank you, Lucy. The Corporate Director will now read out a short statement from a local resident. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So Mr. Beddoes wishes to speak against the application and raises a number of questions which I have summarised as issues. First one is access to Horton Lodge and the damage to the road. The second is the extent to the boundary of the site, and the third is the location of the caravans on site, and the fourth is the unkept conifers to the site. These are presented as questions, and the case officer has responded to these questions directly. But what I have done for this evening is I have summarised Mr. Beddoes' concerns. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Annette. We have local members present, Councillors Sutton and Councillors Holmes. Do you wish to speak? Thank you, Councillor Sutton.
Members, while I appreciate that the issues surrounding the sourcing of sufficient land to satisfy gypsy and traveller accommodation in South Staffordshire, currently on this particular pitch, 2 gypsy and traveller pitches had been permitted already. Only one's actually in use. We are advised that very special circumstances exist for this application. The majority of that, at number 6 on your document, talks about the issues or the failure of this council to actually provide adequate and sufficient land supply for the actual need identified. It doesn't talk about this particular application. Pay some reference, but the majority of it is about what the council is not able to provide. Little reference is made to the actual need. Sorry, I apologise. Little reference is actually made to the actual experience issued the issues of the experiences of the neighbours who they have detailed about the noise that they've already experienced with the pitches at this location, about the traffic, about the pollution, about the ongoing familial problems, constant disputes. These are some things that I'm quite concerned about. The issues that don't outweigh very special circumstances, but they certainly bring into question whether very special circumstances exist in this particular application. There has been some attempt to placate the neighbours by the 8 conditions suggested that accompany this document. But I cannot agree with the planning officer's recommendation to approve this application. In my humble opinion, no very special circumstances have been exhibited and they haven't been demonstrated. I ask members to consider whether to approve this application before you.
Councillor Holmes.
Well, I was hoping to respond to a decision that we haven't yet made. Is that all right? May I speak later?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Does any other member wish to ask a question? Rob Reid.
First, listen to the officers. Conditions, or not, sorry, objections that are raised. I'd like to hear it.
Kelly or Lucy, please. Thank you.
I'm not aware there were specific questions to be able to respond to, so I'm not sure if you want me to sort of, obviously the case officer has considered the issues that have been raised, the residents, what their comments have been, and has carried out a planning balance exercise. And I would tend to disagree that the report bases on where the council's been found wanting. I think they look at the personal circumstances of this family and the information that's been provided to say that that does constitute very special circumstances, given the setting and this case on its merits, and the fact that the site is so well contained. It already has 2 pitches on site. I can't comment whether someone's in one at the moment or not, but they are still there as granted consent, and this seeks to maximise the land within the existing site. And on balance, the impact on the green belt is considered to be less than harmful, so therefore it's acceptable. I'm not sure what else in terms of, as I said, there wasn't specific questions for me to address.
Okay. Has any other member, Penny Owen, you've got a question?
Yes, I do have a question. At the bottom of page 26, it refers to the applicant's need for the family. Is there a personal statement available from this family, please, about this particular need? And if so, could we have that read to us, please?
Yes, basically, we have to make an assessment based upon the information that has actually been submitted, personal information, and the statement itself does actually contain confidential information, and therefore it's not actually available, for discussion. Other than the information that is actually contained, Chair, in the report, which actually demonstrates that the case has actually been made out that this actually pitch is actually required for the grandchildren, so there are personal needs. So other than that statement itself is not actually available, but you've got a summary and the key headline information in your report, which in my view should be sufficient for you to actually consider as a material planning consideration.
Can I just have a moment just to double check, because we do get these personal statements and there is something online as part, but I haven't had a chance to read. Can I just have a moment to have a look and see if that's got all the information that you need? Yeah, it's actually online. It's part of the design and access statement, so you can see the full details. Quite often, as Pardip quite rightly says, is that sometimes if it goes into say medical conditions or personal, so then we redact that part of it. But on this case, this is just purely a family need with children there, so that's not considered to be sensitive. So it has been online throughout the course of this application.
Thank you very much for that, Kelly. Robert, correction, Brian Cox, you've got a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I think that there are some members who don't know what a, a, a pitch is and what it represents, and it's not as obvious as it looks. And I think we ought to decide, say this what it is in quite detail.
Yes, thank you. Kelly, do you want to?
What is a pitch? That is a question. It's not defined necessarily. Yeah, it is defined in the guidance note as being a family unit, which tends to comprise, as a rule of thumb, one static, one tourer, a works vehicle, and a car. But that isn't the case for everything, because it's not, that's guidance. So on this case here, we've got two pictures, as you can see on the screen. Is there any way of zooming in on that, just ever so slightly, please? Just so you can see. Perfect, thank you. So you can see the two existing pitches, the one that's to the southern boundary, which is a larger chalet type mobile home, and then there's where the cross is a touring caravan, and then the two parking spaces. To the east of the site, you can see another large pad that's existing, two parking spaces and space for another tourer. Those are two pitches, one each. What they're proposing here is two caravans to fit in the space to the northern boundary of the site. So it's not large enough for a traditional pitch that would be a mobile home and a tourer and two vans. So that's why they're applying for two caravans. That would, in theory, subject to further checks, accord with site licensing requirements for gypsy and traveller sites for health and safety reasons, and that's why they've applied for two caravans. So as I say, we have rules of thumb as to what a pitch is. Sometimes we use caravans, sometimes we use pitches, and it depends on each case. I hope that hasn't made it even muddier, but that's the best description I can give you, I'm afraid.
Councillor Reid.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a bit concerned that, and you can empathise with the local members, but I've got concerns about the list of special reasons that were read out by the officer Lucy Duffy, which satisfy the needs for permission to be granted. And I think that's something we've got to look at very, very carefully, because if ever this were turned down tonight, I don't think we'd have much chance at an appeal, because it seems strong evidence to me that what you read out was sufficient to quite special thing. Sorry. It's me.
Yes, the case officer's recommendation before you is for approval with the very special circumstances that clearly outweigh the harm. Yes.
Councillor Allen.
During the course of my career, I've taught a lot of children, and I have taught Romani and traveller children. I can say to you that there is a need for young people, particularly, to have a more settled existence in schooling and in health terms. And I can say to you, hand on heart, that they make very rapid strides when they're given that benefit. Their necessity to travel all the time is something which is decreasing, and they are increasingly looking for a more settled environment, because there is a social benefit to being close to their family where they receive support. There is a need for them, for their children to be monitored and to be accepting of all help of all kinds that we take for granted. Travellers and gypsies are considered to be a disadvantaged minority. I have had a presentation about this at General Synod too, and I am sympathetic to looking at family need. They do congregate in family groups. We frequently experience incursions in our district in various parks and in the Wolverhampton area, and that's partly because they're trying to congregate together in family groups quite often, or for major celebrations. So I would say to you, I am sympathetic to this for the reasons I'm outlining now. I do understand the concerns of the neighbours, and there would always be concerns from neighbours for this kind of application. I did actually look at the need for a new road and think they're probably, in some instances, travellers are perfectly capable of helping with this kind of provision themselves. I'm very sorry I didn't read the supporting statement. I didn't realise it was aligned with the application. I was in the papers, but I do think we have to consider very seriously what the planning officers have had to say, and I do understand the social advantage of it.
Thank you for that, Penny. Chris Steele.
Again, thank you, Chairman. Looking at the officer's recommendation is to approve, but subject to the conditions attached. So when we look at page 33, the first item, condition number 3, the site shall not be occupied by any persons other than members of the Lee extended family, etc. Number 5, no commercial activities shall take place on the site, including storage of materials. And number 6, no vehicle over 3.5 tonnes shall be stationed, parked or stored on the site. I think conditions are brilliant, but I'm interested as to who's going to monitor these 3 conditions, and or do we have to rely on other occupants of the site to monitor it and to, you know, let people know what's going on?
Thank you. I mean, in normal circumstances, the majority of complaints that we get come from members of the public, and I've no doubt if there were breaches of conditions, if these were granted, right, that might well happen. But they would then be enforcement officers' actions by this local authority. Does that answer your query? Okay.
I think Kelly just wants to.
Oh, Kelly, sorry.
Kelly.
Just to add to that, because that's absolutely right. But we also twice a year do the gypsy count, where we have to go out and monitor all the sites, and whilst they're there for a national return on the caravan counting, it's often an opportunity to spot things that maybe aren't in accordance with planning permission, and that's quite often how things come up as well. But yes, as the chairman said, the vast majority are done through the neighbour notifications, etc.
Thank you for that, Kelly. Victoria, you've got.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to say that I absolutely sympathise with Councillor Sutton's comments and the fact that she's representing her constituents who are clearly concerned about this possible application being approved. Unfortunately, I just don't feel that the objections that we've received from the neighbours are material planning considerations. Yes, there might be disputes on the site. Yes, there might be potholes. I don't know that those are reasons for us to reject this application, unfortunately, as much as I feel for them. And something that Councillor Allen said really did resonate with me, and that is to say that we, you know, these children deserve somewhere settled where they can thrive and feel that they are living in a consistent environment, really. So although I was minded to agree with Councillor Sutton, I'm afraid I have to say that I do agree with this application. Approval.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Does any other member wish to speak before? No? Okay. Councillor Sutton and Councillor Holmes, before I ask the committee to make a decision, Do you wish to make an alternative proposal?
Mr. Chairman, what I was going to ask for is 2 more conditions to be considered. Is this at the right time of the debate to enter them? Okay. I just feel I've assumed that this will get passed, it will be approved. So I'd like 2 more conditions to be considered, please. One is the dependent on the county highways comments. I feel that 30 miles an hour is too much. I think it should the restriction should be reduced to at least at the most, I should say, 20 miles per hour, given the restricted access to the site itself and the condition that vehicles of 3.5 tonnes, will be allowed on site. I just feel that 30 miles an hour is too much as a restriction on that. And the other one was later on the penultimate paragraph on page 27 about the users of the path 39, which goes directly alongside the application, is that the surface of the footpath must be kept in a state of repair so that it can be exercised safely and at all times. And heavy vehicular use can cause the way to become unsuitable for use and in some instances dangerous. I think that there should be a condition in there to protect that, please.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me take advice, please, from the officers.
Chair, well, I can deal with one of the conditions. I'm just scribbling down the conditions that you wanted to impose. First of all, it's not possible for a planning condition to be imposed legally to deal with speed limits. So that is a matter which actually is outside of the planning authority's control. It's the highway matter. So if there are any speed limit concerns, you know, one would actually simply approach the county direct. So certainly, Chair, that one isn't possible. I was actually sort of scribbling down the other conditions. I think the other one that you referred to was condition 6, where it reads, no vehicle over 3 tonnes shall be stationed, parked or stored on the site. And sorry, what was your alternative?
No, it was on page 27. The second paragraph from the bottom refers to it's a comment of pathway 39 should be protected, if you like, from any potential damage by the development of this site.
Chair, that's actually outside the site boundary, and also again the principle in law is if one does actually damage a public footpath, you know, that in itself can be an offence, a statutory offence. So again, Chair, I don't actually think that it's appropriate to actually impose or possible legally to impose a condition along those lines outside the site, and there are other statutory provisions which deal with the protection of public footpaths.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you. Councillor Sutton, do you wish to add anything further?
No, I stick by what I said previously. However, I will challenge a couple of things that members have said in relation to the fact one member muted the fact that people with these sorts of applications, neighbours always object. These are neighbours who have experience because there are already pitches down there. What they've talked about, it's not just potholes, although potholes have been mentioned. They've talked about the noise, they've talked about the pollution, they've talked about the disturbance, the onward constant family disputes. These are things that, yes, they may not be, as I say, they do not outweigh the actual consideration of very special circumstances, but they certainly need to be taken into account. And that's something I must reiterate. Yes, the conditions are there. Yes, they're going to be policed. And I'll say police because that's the people who end up doing it down there.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Sutton. Okay, I think everybody's had the opportunity to speak. So the application before you, there is a recommendation to approve with conditions, and those conditions we've just been discussing are on page 32 and 33. All those in favour of the proposal?
6, 7, 9, 12, 13.
Thank you. That application has been approved. Thank you, members. Oh, I do apologise. Those against, please.
So there's 2
Two
abstentions.
abstentions. Thank you. Okay, members, let's move on to the final planning application that's before us this evening. That's 22/00339/FUL, and it's Slade Heath Garage, Old Stafford Road. Lucy, if you could just summarise the application for us, please.
The application site is located off Old Stafford Road in Slade Heath and relates to an existing operating centre for an HGV hire fleet, where the company maintains and repairs the vehicles and undertakes administrative operations. Planning permission is sought for an upward extension to the existing single-storey office, which sits behind the 2-storey main office fronting onto Old Stafford Road. The purpose of the extension is to ensure the site remains viable for the business to grow within the existing site. The site is within the Greenbelt, and the proposed extension would, in combination with previously approved extensions, be disproportionate in size to the original building. However, the extension would be moderate in size, filling a gap in between 2 higher parts of the built form on site. As a result, the impact on the openness of the Greenbelt would be very limited, both spatially and visually. It is considered that this limited harm is outweighed by the economic benefits of the proposal, and therefore very special circumstances have been demonstrated. The proposal would not be harmful to the amenity of neighbouring residential properties, would be sympathetic to the character of the surrounding area, and provide sufficient parking space. There are no objections from consultees or neighbours. Overall, the scheme is considered acceptable and recommended for approval, subject to a number of conditions.
Thank you very much, Lucy. There are no public speakers on this one. Local members present are Councillor Sutton and Councillor Holmes. Do you wish to speak? You don't. Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak? Well, let's move straight forward to the decision then. The application is recommended for those in favour, please say.
That is unanimous, Chair.
And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, member. We'll then move on to the monthly update report from the lead planning manager. Over to you, Kelly, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the monthly report covers the usual topics of training, changes in national policy, recent appeal decisions and performance monitoring. I will note as well in paragraph 4.1 that I have not updated that paragraph to reflect the new numbers in planning committee. So for those eagle-eyed that have spotted, thank you, and I will make sure it's corrected for next month's training. Next month's report. In terms of training, obviously we've had trees and training this evening, which I hope you found useful. We're looking at additional training sessions over coming months. There won't be one before the August committee. We're looking at probably in October's committee now before doing one on permitted development rights, which I know is one that members been looking at. If there's anything else, as always, just please let me know. Turning now to changes in national policy, there have been no changes since my previous report. There have, though, been 3 appeal decisions that I want to bring to your attention since the last report was brought to you. The first one relates to a long-standing case for us at Sandhill Day Nursery in Lower Penn. This related to an appeal against our refusal to allow the development to be carried out not in compliance with the BREEAM energy efficiency standards. The appeal was dismissed. The inspector did not accept the appellant's case that it would be difficult for them to retrofit the property to achieve the required standard, and their case that it would be disrupting their business. The inspector noted that it was required as part of the previous appeal decision, and the original concept of the building was meant to be designed to achieve that. As such, it did not justify setting aside the long-standing policy basis, and therefore it was dismissed. That case has now been passed to enforcement for further action. The second appeal relates to against a refusal for a single-storey detached outbuilding in Penwood Lodge in Pen Common. The appeal was dismissed again because the inspector concluded that there was no considerations that outweighed the harm to the greenbelt, and that very special circumstances did not exist. The third and final appeal since the last report relates to a refusal to demolish existing stables and storage buildings to replace it with a new dwelling at Stone Cottage in Pattingham. The appeal was dismissed again. The inspector concluded that with the council's the recommendations and conclusions that it would have a greater impact on the openness of the greenbelt than what was existing on site, and that was going to be harmful, so that appeal was also dismissed. Then finally, turning to performance statistics, planning enforcement is done on a quarterly basis, and at the time of writing this report, we hadn't done an update to feed into the other council monitoring, which was having us at 83.84% with 72 cases logged. We have had an update since this to feed into the council's monitoring, and it is still at 83%, I'm pleased to say. Finally, for development management and handling planning applications, we're required to report on both speed and quality of decision making. Since the last report, the government has updated our statistics on speed, and I'm pleased to say we're still well above target. We're required to be above 60% for major applications, and we're at 90.6%. And for all other applications, we are required to be above 70%, and we're at 86.1%. Quality of decision making in terms of appeals, that has remained unchanged since the last report. It's done on a 2-yearly window, and they remain again above target, so below target, which is for majors to be below 10%, and we're at 1.9, and for other applications to be below 10%, and we're at 0.8. That concludes my report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, you've got a question.
It's not so much a question, it's because I'm new on planning and I haven't really looked at this information before, and I did want to mention it in our last planning committee meeting, but I couldn't summon up the courage. But I just wanted to congratulate you really, because target is 10% for quality or below, and you've got 1.9%, and then for speed, you've got a target of 60% and you've managed 90.6%. I think that's outstanding. I suppose there is a question there, and that is, you know, how does that compare with other authorities? Because I think that needs sort of shouting from the rooftops, really.
I mean, we do manage our statistics, thank you, on behalf of the team. So I say it's not me, I don't do planning applications, so it's Lucy and Laura and colleagues in our team, so I'll certainly pass that on. Yeah, I mean, we do manage our performance and our statistics, and it was, you know, in response to the question we had earlier about, you know, managing applications, it is really important that we do work within timescales, and where necessary, where cases are being drawn out, we get extensions of time in place, particularly if we need to be able to make that decision. In terms of comparisons with others, we've certainly moved up in the national reporting. You can access every local authority in the country, in England, in order to see how you perform. We're definitely, you know, doing well for ourselves. There are some that are higher, there are some that are lower, but, you know, that's part of managing the application churn that we have.
Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. Didn't want to disappoint you. Two things. One on the appeals. I know that the obviously 2 appeals. I'm interested. You probably won't tell me what the likely outcome is, because I won't mention Sandhills. But the second one, the Penwood Lodge, in the inspector's notes, he said The detached outbuilding was under construction at the time of my site visit. Therefore, as the development has commenced, I have considered this appeal on a retrospective basis. And obviously, he's turned down the appeal. Simple terms, is that going to be knocked down? As it shouldn't have been constructed? That's the first question.
They've actually submitted another application on that site now, and in the meantime, they put in a variation to remove their PD removal, which we had to approve given the previous discussions that we've had. So without prejudice, and probably not for me to say here, the determination of that planning application will result in any enforcement action or not, as the case may be.
Yes, thanks. That explains that one. The first one, Sandhills, as this committee made the decision, does it come back? Does the ultimate outcome come back to this committee? Or is it left to enforcement to decide what happens when this committee made the original decision?
No, that's down for enforcement, and the variation to remove that condition was taken delegated as well, that refusal. So that was made by us and then it was dismissed by the inspectorate. So it's with enforcement now and it will be enforced.
And sorry, just quickly on, I referred to it earlier, lack of information on plans. That one plan, there was just a square, red square on in the middle of a field. No indication whatsoever on the size of that. Well, there was a suggestion of 175 square metres, which actually was obviously not correct. Is there any way we can request more information to people who put the applications in? And we don't seem to be doing any site visits anymore. I don't know why that should be. Could we have an explanation on that, really? Thank you.
So in terms of the application that's been determined this evening, as Lucy said earlier on, it was outlined. So that plan was appropriate for an outline planning permission. In terms of the square area, we're going to have a look at whether it was on the application form. I mean, you could always ask for further information to a case officer. We'd always encourage that, certainly if something isn't quite clear or we're not sure on what that looks like. But the plan was acceptable and appropriate for that application, for an outline application. So just to confirm as well, in terms of the error is in the case officer report for the number, the area was correct on the application and on all the files that were on public access. It was just erroneously typed. It was a typo in the officer's report that's been before committee, which is why it was on the late list. And
I've mentioned site visits, so we don't seem to be on any.
Members, we've got 49 members, and if they oppose a site visit, we ask for it. They don't ask, we don't have one. Simple as that.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just say, in response to Councillor Steele, when I've had queries on plans where it's been a bit vague or because of the scaling, you haven't been able to get the accurate measurements, I've asked the planning officer and they've always been most helpful. So I suggest Mr. Steele, or Councillor Steele, perhaps asks the relevant planning officer.
You come back, Chris.
Well, simple terms, I don't look at every single planning application, otherwise I wouldn't be doing anything else. I only look at the ones relevant to my area or the ones that are coming up on planning committee.
Yeah. So, Penny, go ahead.
I think the confusion arose because of the change in the statistics on the which we had late notice of on the additional information. And I don't think either of us were sure whether the actual outline plan was correct or not.
Okay, thank you. Just for the avoidance of doubt, if the outline plan was correct, we would have informed committee before making any decisions. So the outline plan was correct, the information on the application was correct. It was after the point of going to print on the officer report, we noticed it was a typo. If there was ever something of that size of discrepancy on a plan or an application, we would alert members of planning committee in advance to make sure that you could make the correct decision with the full information.
Can I just come back on that? I was a quantity surveyor, so I'm used to seeing 30 metres by 30 metres and things like that. to me, that's hardly asking a lot of people to put that information on their plans. Okay.
Anything else from anybody else? Councillor Reid.
I'm rather surprised that Councillor Steele is saying that he only looks at local plans. As I'm a member of this planning committee, I'm looking at all the plans that come forward for our determination. So that surprised me. The other thing is, when we were talking about comparisons and the speed, etc., of our planning, one assumes that we are comparing with like ourselves with a lot of green belts compared with, say, other authorities that are simply dealing with an application with no green belt indication.
Not necessarily, because it's about performance. So the size of the team and the nature of the applications we deal with is commensurate with being a Greenbelt Rural Authority. The idea of the national performance statistics is that it benchmarks every local authority against each other in terms of making those decisions against the government set timescales of 8 or 13 weeks, unless there's an extension of time in place to agree an extension beyond that. So I don't think the size of our authority or the ruralness of it really matters. It's making sure that we are making timely decisions that we need to, and that's what it shows that we're doing. So hopefully that can be seen. And I see the link's in the document. If you want to have a look at the link, you can go straight through it and click on it's an Excel spreadsheet of all the authorities to see. And there's all sorts. There's a lot of Greenbelt, but there's others as well. But we perform higher than some of the more urban ones, and it's just about decision making at the end of the day and against the type of application.
I just want to make an observation, Robert. You perhaps didn't hear what Councillor Steele said. He said he doesn't have time to read all planning applications, but he does read those within his own patch, and he does read those that are coming to committee. Okay. Thank you very much. We've completed our session. Thank you all members. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And we're going to go out bright and early and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you all very much.